a one-loss team in the college football playoff.
Syracuse.
Well, that's not good. Yeah. And one loss team from the
right.
Yeah. They'd have to hope that Clemson now loses twice down the stretch,
because they don't have a championship game, or do they?
Yeah, they do.
They do. Yeah, they do.
Loses twice down the stretch and then leap, and they have to run the table, which their schedule's gotten way, way harder.
Right.
And they have to get in there. It's gonna be wild in the ACC. I'll tell you right now, it's gonna be wild in the ACC if that happened. But Clemson has. I mean, they don't even have marshmallows now. South Carolina's better, but even still, it's not even a marshmallow schedule. What's softer?
Pillow fight.
What's softer than a marshmallow? Like, that's what it is.
A cloud.
Yeah, like just vapor they have to run through. Like a cirrus cloud.
Yeah.
Like one you wouldn't even notice if you were flying in a plane and went through it. Like that kind of cloud.
So just a light fog on a morning jog.
That's what they have the rest of the way on their schedule. But right now, the top four, are both from the Big Ten and SEC, and those teams are going to play each other in their respective leagues. Clemson is undefeated and has the easiest 4 games on the way out. Now, they would probably have to play North Carolina as it stands right now, a team that can light it up on offense with a really good young quarterback in Drake May.
He's incredible.
Yeah. They have him. They can really light it up on offense, so that's going to make it difficult for Clemson, so they could get knocked out of this thing in the last week.
Changed quarterbacks all of a sudden. You think that's just a this game thing?
I think it was just a this game thing. Now, if it continues, then that's troubling. But DJU, until Syracuse, is playing really, really well.
Right.
So
I almost had to eat my words. I was like, Syracuse. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no. Oh, no. I'm going to have to backtrack this.
But there are only 6 undefeated teams left, and one of them is TCU.
That's insane.
And so
never would have thought that.
Yes. And so Clemson, who doesn't have to, who could wind up losing, but they still have the easiest path on the way out.
Yeah.
And 4 of the 6, have matchups against each other, so you're going to lose 2 of those. So at most, you're going to have 3.
At most.
More than likely. Well, I guess you could have 4. At most, you could have 4 because TCU could win out. Because, again, there's not anybody else. So at most, you're going to have 4 undefeated teams.
But again, we don't think that's going to happen.
No, because the league is so. So do you think that if there is a loss by TCU or Oklahoma, and that could be to Oklahoma State. So if Oklahoma State is that loss in the Big 12 title game, say they both run the table to that and Oklahoma State wins, does the Big 12 get a team in?
The only way a one-loss team would get in would be probably Oklahoma State, in my mind. Because unfortunately, a TCU loss is going to come late in the season, and for some reason, historically, we've seen that the whatever made up fabricated criteria that the committee has, late losses seem to really hurt teams more than if you lost in week 3 to whoever.
Well,
one thing I think we're not talking about is Alabama always gets the benefit of the doubt. They always get that mulligan. And Oklahoma represented the Big 12 so poorly for the majority of the time that they were making the playoff that I think it kind of set the Big 12 as a conference, as a whole, against the 8-ball when being on the bubble of the CFP has been an option. Because, look, when Baylor and TCU were tied for the Big 12 title a couple years back, that they pretty much canceled each other out. Oklahoma never performed well. And Oklahoma and now Georgia, they got Tennessee. They got 3 teams that are, all have arguments to get in. And that doesn't even account for Big Ten and Clemson.
Well, the nightmare scenario is, and this won't happen, they will not put 3 SEC teams in here because I think people would lose their collective mind. I wouldn't put it past them to want to try and do this. But the nightmare scenario is if Tennessee beats Georgia in the SEC championship. Would that be no? They got to play each other. So the nightmare scenario is that somehow Alabama sneaks in there with 1 loss after those teams cannibalize each other.
Well, so say Tennessee beats Georgia and then loses to Alabama the second time around.
Right.
That means there's 3 1-loss
SEC
teams, right? So
or is Tennessee on the whoa.
Trying to kill our robots in here.
I'm so sorry. So sorry, guys.
That's a monster. Now the desk is going to
be
take
so
on a life
energized.
of itself.
It's almost like you shouldn't have drinks around electronic equipment. Anyway, we'll clean that up in a little bit. Does Tennessee have one loss?
No, they're undefeated.
They're undefeated. Okay, so yeah, that's the nightmare scenario in my head.
Yeah.
When there's 3 teams in the SEC with 1 loss, I think Alabama's like they've done it before where they've gotten to sit out that SEC title game and then they sneak in because the favorite lost.
Let's not also discount the fact that Michigan could beat Ohio State, go to the Big Ten championship game and
lose.
win or lose, and then Ohio State is in there. Yeah, exactly. So you have that as well, where Ohio State's sitting out there with 1 loss. Michigan could be sitting out there with 1 loss, and you could have, they could tilt it to where you could get the rematch or not, to where like it could be Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Michigan.
And you see that the fact that we're even discussing the scenarios of conference titles games in other conferences and not the Big 12 on the Big One too, I think that bodes poorly just because has any team besides Oklahoma ever gotten to the CFP?
No.
That's kind of been the problem.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, I do think that you're going to find an interesting scenario, and I think TCU has enough clout, even though they don't have the most historic following. They've been hovering around there.
And they go
long
undefeated.
enough.
They got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, they go undefeated. Then I don't think it's a problem. The only problem that you would have to find is like, okay, so do we put 2 SEC teams in here, or is it the one that we're all thinking where it's like, Georgia, Ohio State, or Michigan, Clemson, TCU?
Yeah.
And
see,
I think,
and look,
Or do they try and be like, well, they didn't have a great schedule, let's just leave them out? I don't think that happens. But
well, Clemson, by virtue of being a 2-time national title winner,
gets the benefit of the doubt.
Gets the benefit of the doubt. So if they're 13-0, of course, anybody's 13-0, they're going. But Clemson's going to be the spoiler of the 3 SEC teams thing right there.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen because of Clemson. But Clemson will not get the benefit of the doubt if they have 1 loss, right?
No, because their conference is just,
especially
not for nothing, ACC fans, if you're watching the big one too, abysmal.
Disagree.
You disagree? I think it's a cupcake.
Disagree. Wake Forest, Florida State, NC State with Devin Leary, now he's out, but Wake Forest, Florida State, and North Carolina can beat anybody.
so can
North
Syracuse.
Carolina can't stop anybody.
But they can still score over anybody. So they're like, and they might be able to beat, like, yeah, they lost to Notre Dame, but like, yeah, North Carolina can't stop
I would
anybody.
say, okay, on the big one too, seems like a hot take. I would say that the big one too, top to bottom, is
Big
a
12
tougher
is better than the
conference
ACC,
than the ACC.
but
So you're getting that benefit of the doubt there. Is what I'm saying.
I'm not disagreeing with you there, but they are also getting historically crapped on, just like the Big 12 is, and just like the Pac-12 will. If the Pac-12, other than USC, like if USC can win the Pac-12 title game, they might be in.
You really think so with 1 loss at this point?
If there's 1-loss teams in there, because they're USC and it's Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and all that stuff.
Is Oregon's hickey against Georgia too big?
I think it's too big. I think especially if Georgia's in it.
Talk about bloodlettings. That was like a ritual sacrifice.
Yeah, especially if Georgia is in fact in it, then what do you say? Like there's all these, oh no, that game at the beginning there didn't matter. And it for all intents and purposes, it didn't. It didn't. And for an SEC team, wouldn't.
Right. It wouldn't have.
So, but you can't, apply that same logic. So, yeah, I mean, TCU's it's going to be tough. At that game, Gary Patterson owned Texas when he was there.
Yeah.
But guess where he is now?
Texas.
And guess what he's going to do? He's going to sit in a room and he's going to watch a video. He didn't even have to watch that much film. He knows this team.
Okay, I got a question.
Does
for
he
you.
know Max Duggan, though? I'm not sure he does.
I got a question for you guys. Is Gary Patterson more looking forward to facing TCU, or is Joey McGuire more excited to face Baylor?
Gary Patterson against TCU. Now, look,
they have a statue of that man in Fort Worth.
Joey McGuire is very excited to face Baylor, no matter what he said to Smokey in the one-on-one we aired today. He's very excited about it. He can coach speak his way out of it all he wants. He's very excited about it, and he's got a circle on it. But no one in the world holds a grudge like Gary Patterson. No one.
I mean, when I think of Gary Patterson,
Or you against Gary Patterson.
I mean, like, yeah.
I think of Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison, where he's got that list of people to kill, and I think
Not today.
I think Sonny Dykes might be on that list for Gary Patterson.
Well, I mean, the whole, like, he'll say, like, I'm grateful for the university and blah, 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 blah. But I'm sure he thinks he should have gotten a hero's exit whenever he wanted to leave TCU.
Let me present you with this, though, because we keep dismissing Clemson if they have one loss, and TCU, for that matter, if they have one loss. But if it comes down to it, where it's really only like 2 undefeated teams and the rest are kind of fighting for
probably will be.
Right. Is it goes to a one-loss Clemson before it goes to a one-loss TCU.
Absolutely, because they've got pelts.
Yeah.
They've got pelts on the wall. They've got
Which
those.
is unfortunate because, like we said, we don't know if TCU is going to run the table, and that doesn't matter because then they could just go to the Big 12 championship with one loss and still run the table by
while
all
the
intents and
committee
purposes.
is in a different formation than it was of people than the last time that they screwed TCU out of a playoff,
Right.
Which they also screwed Baylor out of the playoffs.
Somehow
too,
screwed out simultaneously.
But like,
One true champion, guys.
but but once that happened, the last time where they did mental gymnastics to keep the Big 12 champion out. I mean, I don't think anything's changed about TCU since then, right? What's changed in the national perception? Because and the national perception matters.
That was about as high as their national perception was ever going
But
to get.
nothing's changed in the 8 years since 2014, right?
No.
Nothing's changed for them, for the national people. Now, I'm not talking about like if you follow the Big 12 and you follow TCU, many things have changed, but nothing's really changed in the national thing other than they have a coach that's a lot friendlier now. But that's it, you know.
Yeah, there's still the purple team in Fort Worth.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
And that is sort of the well, for no pun intended, the cross to bear for Baylor and TCU and some of these teams going forward is that unless you get there, that's always your ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Is the team that makes a lot of noise, but we're not going to quite let into the party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're just one outside the list.
Yeah, exactly.
Always. And until you break through that ceiling, that's kind of going to be your station. And yeah, really what it would take is just to kick down the door and be like, we're undefeated, we're here finally.
Yeah.
And that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is just if you're a blue blood, if you have any national championships in any time in the last, like, say, 30 years, maybe even longer, but say Miami was a one-loss team in the ACC and won the ACC title game and was sitting outside
Y'all
there.
remember the 80s?
Hey,
Remember
I remember.
2001.
2001, the best college football team that was ever constructed.
That was a
by-
pro football team. Don't lie to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Butch Davis, his Cleveland Browns team would have lost to those Miami teams.
yeah, exactly. Like 752 first-round draft picks on that. No, no, it was ridiculous. 85 scholarships. I think 82 of them were like in the first 3 rounds. The worst player on that 01 team was Ken Dorsey.
I was going to say Jeremy Shockey. Like,
No, the worst player was Ken Dorsey, who was a Heisman finalist. Like, that's how good that team was. He was the worst guy and was a Heisman finalist. So, yeah, but I mean, those teams, because they're blue bloods. TCU, I mean, nobody that's really alive can cogently remember the last time that they were national champions, right?
Wait, do they have a national champion?
In the 30s.
Doak Walker times,
yeah, Doak
right?
Walker, yeah.
I didn't even know this,
There
and
were
I've been like following these schools for
There
forever.
were not face masks.
No face mask the last time TCU
No
won a
face
national
mask.
title.
Were there even leather helmets?
There were
they
leather
playing?
helmets.
Were they playing rugby?
There were leather helmets. There were no face masks. There was not television the last time they won. Think about that. There was no television the last time they won the national
Yeah,
championship.
that is how time works. But
Yeah, but that's a
people
long
staring at the radio.
But that was so. Again, there's not going to be somebody in the committee who's like, 38, they were fantastic. This is not,
There's Lou Holtz there. They bring him in.
But yeah, so they have to fight against that, because as much as the committee will say that these things don't matter, the proof is in the pudding. They had an opportunity to say, listen, Ohio State, you lost a game a few weeks ago. We're going to put the Big 12 champion in because, FSU's undefeated and Oregon's undefeated and, all this. Like, they're in. They won their conferences. The Big 12 champions going in. Sorry, Big 10. But what happened? Ohio State won a couple games in a row, and the Big 12 didn't have a championship game. They're like, all we need. And
granted, they did absolutely obliterate. They turned somebody into vapor the week before that game.
Yeah.
Before that,
of course,
selection.
Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, the Big 12 commissioner at the time also was like, well, you could take them both. You're only taking 4, and they're going to take an SEC team, and they're going to take the defending national champion, which was FSU at the time, and they're going to take the Nike school. So again, just tell the committee Baylor or TCU, one or the other. And he was like, but they're both deserving. Yeah, we get it, Bob. Here's the thing.
Come on, Bob.
Don't. And I think, Bob Bowlesby has a very, this career as the commissioner, which at the end was fantastic because he stared down death in the face. But yeah, that was the low point.
I'll never forgive him pooping his pants with that decision. That was just we're trying to, for the Bible story, split the baby in half or whatever. Yeah. And we're like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
We don't want half of the baby. So
that's exactly what they did. When we come back, we preview the week, make our picks. This is a big one too on 365 Sports.